Welcome back to The Legal Brief, the show where we crush the various legal myths and misinformation surrounding various areas of the gun world. I'm your host, Adam Kraut, and I would appreciate your support in my bid for the NRA Board of Directors. Go check out my website, adamkraut.com, to learn more about that. Now today, we're headed back to the National Firearms Act, or NFA, and we're talking about a topic a lot of you have asked me about in the comments and in our live chats about, the Hearing Protection Act. The Transformer rail from Manticore Arms offers unparalleled versatility for both the AR-15 and now AK platform rifles. This free-floating rail system allows you to attach both M-LOK and key mod segments, Picatinny rail segments, as well as a host of other options. You can bet that almost any attachment will work. Available in OD green, flat dark earth, and of course black, this lightweight setup might be just what you need. To get 10% off anything you buy, use the code TGC10 at manticorearms.com. The Hearing Protection Act, or HPA, was introduced in 2015 by Representative Matt Salmon of Arizona. A simple one-page bill. That's amazing, I know. The HPA would remove the term silencer from the definition of a firearm under the NFA, removing it from the purview of the NFA with regard to taxable transfers. It would also prevent states from imposing a tax or a marking and record-keeping requirement for silencers. Furthermore, it provides for a tax credit on the transfer tax that was paid on transfers from the date of the introduction of the bill. In other words, it's a step in the right direction on dismantling the NFA. With Republicans retaining control of the House and Senate, as well as winning the presidency, there's a lot of talk about the action this new administration will take once it begins its term. A number of individuals and now blogs have posted that the Hearing Protection Act will be passed in as little as 60 days. Pump the brakes, guys. Before we go any further, I have to preface the next part. I think this bill is great and good for everyone, both individuals like myself as well as the industry. I mean, who wants to pay a $200 tax and wait 8 months to have a transfer approved, especially for something that's meant to protect one's hearing? Nobody, right? I did call my representative as well as my senators when this bill was introduced. That said, I think the optimism in the speed which this bill may be passed potentially is overlooking the reality of passing legislation. Simply put, I wouldn't hold my breath or stop buying silencers in the meantime because it might be a while, potentially a pretty long while. For some context, in the 109th Congress, which ran from 2005 to 2006, over 10,500 bills were introduced and only 440 became law, which roughly equates to about 2%. See my point? We need to think back to our high school civics class, or at least what should have been taught in it, to understand how a bill becomes a law. Don't worry, I've included a link to a fun Schoolhouse Rock video which gives a quick visualization of the process. But there's a bit more to it. So we're going to go through a 10,000-foot overview of the process. In the House of Representatives, a bill is introduced and then assigned a number. It is then referred to the Speaker of the House, who assigns it to a committee or committees who have jurisdiction over the topic. When this bill was introduced, it was assigned to the House Ways and Means Committee, as well as the Judiciary Committee, where it still remains. The committees hold hearings related to the bill and may or may not edit the actual content of the bill itself. If the committee agrees to the language, it will then vote for it to be reported to the floor. It's entirely possible a bill makes it this far and then dies in committee. After being reported to the floor, the Speaker of the House decides what bills will be considered and in what order. Most bills end up going to the Rules Committee, which create rules that govern the actual procedures of how a bill will be considered by the House. If a bill actually makes it to the floor for a vote and passes, it then has to go over to the Senate for a similar process, unless that same bill was also introduced in the Senate, which is what happened with the HPA. The process for a bill making it through the Senate is similar in the sense of it's reported to a committee where it may or may not be modified and then is debated on the floor. The HPA is currently in the Senate Finance Committee. However, this is where some of the similarities end. The main difference between the House and the Senate is that in the Senate, there are no rules relating to the debate of the bill. In essence, a bill could make it as far as the floor and then die there.
Yes, they call me Bill, and I'm standing here on Capitol. Oh!
Unlike the House, which has rules related to the debate, generally speaking, the Senate does not. In other words, a senator could filibuster a bill by debating it to death unless the senators invoke cloture. Now, I'm sure at this point your eyes are crossed and you just want to know how this ends. Cloture, and no, that's not closure, requires at least 60 senators to invoke and would force the end of a debate on a bill, which would then turn into a vote. Herein lies a big problem for the Hearing Protection Act with the current makeup of our legislature. The Republicans hold 51 seats in the Senate in the next Congress, which is only a simple majority. This is 9 short of the required number to invoke cloture. And bear in mind, not all 51 senators that are Republican are exactly staunch Second Amendment supporters. So that means you'd likely have to find at least 10 or more Democratic senators who'd be willing to invoke cloture on this bill. Given the topic and the stance of most of the Democratic senators on the Second Amendment, that might be a little tough to do. If the bill makes it to the floor for a vote in both chambers and they both pass the same bill, which almost never happens, it then goes to the president's desk for signature. Otherwise, it goes to a committee which attempts to reconcile the differences between the two bills and create one final bill. So what was the point of this quick civics lesson? Even though the Republicans have a majority in Congress and control the White House in 2017, it's not a guarantee that legislation will make it to the president's desk. While the odds for passing pro-gun legislation are greatly increased, it's not going to be a guarantee that if a bill is introduced, it'll become law. Both bills currently remain in committee and haven't even made it to the floor. And since legislation is only good for 2 years before it must be reintroduced, it'll have to start the process all over again in the next Congress. So again, I wouldn't hold off on any silencer purchases on the hopes that this bill becomes a law anytime soon. That said, when the next Congress goes into session and the bills are reintroduced, I'll be on the phone demanding my representative and senators support this important bill. I expect all of you to do the same. Unsure of what to say? Among other things, be sure to highlight the positives of silencers, like the fact that they protect your hearing and it stops noise pollution in areas where there are gun ranges. Hopefully that explains a little more about the Hearing Protection Act and the possibility of it becoming law in the near future. If you guys like this episode, you know what to do. Hit that like button and share it around with your friends. Have a question you want answered on the show? Head on over to the legal brief section on theguncollective.com. Also make sure to check out my website, adamkraut.com, and be sure to like The Gun Collective on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Full30, Snapchat, and wherever else you can catch us on social media. And as always, thanks for watching.
The shirts worn in today's episode of The Legal Brief have been provided by Patriot Patch. Click the link in the description to learn more.